Making up his mind, Xianxia got up, stretched out his hand and waved forward. The power of the space force fluctuated, and a long and narrow space crack immediately appeared in front of him. However, compared to the usual tearing space, it seems to be smaller. The laws of heaven and earth in this mysterious boundary bead seem to be very powerful. Xianxia showed a different look but didn't go deep into it. He stretched out his hands and tore away the crack in the space fiercely to the sides. The power of the space force in his body burst out silently, and the long and narrow crack was widened. After releasing his divine consciousness for a moment, Xianxia was pleasantly surprised to find that this space crack was extremely stable. Is that old fellow Xianxia really talking nonsense? Xianxia was suspicious, and dived into the space crack. When he reappeared and looked around, his face sank. The small space with a radius of less than 30 feet is a mess, and there are traces left over from the battle everywhere. 2 incomplete corpses on the ground, blood and internal organs all over the floor. Coming out of the space crack, it was actually still this weird, mysterious small boundary. Frowning his brows, Xianxia tore the space again in disbelief. After repeating it a dozen times, Xianxia didn't continue anymore, but sat cross-legged on the ground, sinking into thought. After tearing the space a dozen times, he couldn't leave this mysterious small boundary. He could only move within a radius of 30 feet. This result surprised him a bit. It seemed that Xianxia was not slanderous. This mysterious boundary bead really had its mysterious side, and he couldn't even escape from this place by tearing the space. Although he did not leave successfully, Xianxia was not without gain. A dozen movements made him vaguely feel that there is a vague barrier outside this small space which isolates him from the outside world. This barrier can't be said to be unclear, but it is precisely because of its existence that the mysterious small boundary can become a world of its own, trapping him here. That should be the law of heaven and earth in the mysterious small boundary. If he could tear through this barrier, Xianxia is confident he would be able to leave here. But wanting to break the law of heaven and earth in the mysterious small boundary, is it easier said than done? Xianxia spent several decades and only able to slightly refine the mysterious boundary bead. Only to grasp a little bit of power to control this piece of heaven and earth to be able to come and go freely. He don't have that much time to spend here. But now, there is no other way other than refining this mysterious boundary bead. How to refine mysterious boundary bead? Refining it is tantamount to refining this world. Xianxia was confused. There is quite a feeling that a dog bites a hedgehog and has nowhere to go. He sat on the spot thinking hard. Don't know how long the time has passed. Xianxia's confused eyes suddenly burst into a faint light. The faint light was like a spark of fire that could start a prairie fire, and his eyes soon became clear. He seemed to understand something. He couldn't help but was shocked, full of energy. He had entered a misunderstanding of thinking before, thinking that if he wanted to leave, he had to refine the world, so he was at a loss. After all, this piece of heaven and earth was sealed in the mysterious boundary bead. The mysterious boundary bead is an emperor treasure, and that is an artifact. He doesn't know how to refine the world, but he knows how to refine the artifact. And since Xianxia has spent decades practicing hard in retreat and refining the mysterious boundary bead, then this emperor treasure must have been contaminated with his aura. As long as he traces the root to the source, finds his aura remains, erases it. And then it can be cultivated again by him. One method is perfect, everything is perfect. Xianxia suddenly understood. He got up, popped out 2 demon flames, and burned the corpse not far away. Xianxia released his spiritual mind and began to explore the 30 square meter space inch by inch, trying to find the traces he wanted. The result went well. He did find Xianxia's remaining aura in this space. It didn't take much effort to erase it. But when Xianxia wanted to leave his aura in it, he was met with a great resistance. Xianxia was right in saying that it was extremely difficult to refine the mysterious boundary bead from the inside, and it was not as easy as refining it outside. The time and power gap required for this must be calculated by hundreds of times. Even if Xianxia is countless times more sophisticated than Xianxia in terms of space force, such refining cannot be accomplished in a short time. Xianxia did some calculations, and the results he got surprised him. It would take at least 10 or 20 years before he could barely refine the mysterious boundary bead and get out of it. Xianxia suddenly regretted that he had killed Fang Peng so quickly. If he were alive, he could have a lot of breathing ground. After frowning and groaning for a long time, Xianxia calmed down his irritability, did not immediately refine the mysterious boundary bead, instead poured a lot of crystal stones from his space ring, placed it in front of him, holding one in each hand, frantically drawing the energy from it. Mysterious space crystal. Xianxia can be so thorough in the power of space force, surpassing Mo Xiaosheng and Xianxia in this field, all thanks to mysterious space crystal. This peculiar crystal stone has always been used as a material for refining the space ring only, but Xianxia has found another way to use it, using his own body to absorb the energy in it, thereby enhancing his control of the power of space force. Mysterious space crystal is extremely rare. Even if others have this idea, it is absolutely difficult to achieve. But Xianxia was different. The mysterious space crystal mine that Xiao stone puppet found under Dragon Cave Mountain in the past gave him the capital to squander it without any worries. There were a lot of mysterious space crystal that were mined back then, but after so many years, Xianxia was able to absorb the power of mysterious space crystal when he was free, and the consumption was extremely huge, and now only a half of the original mining was left. If a worker wants to do his job well, he must first sharpen his tools. If Xianxia wanted to shorten the time for refining the mysterious boundary bead, only by making himself more thorough in understanding of space force, then it will be more convenient to use. So he plans to cultivate a burst of space force first. Pieces of mysterious space crystal turned into powder in Xianxia's hands, and the sun rose from the outside world, but the passage of time was not noticed in the mysterious small boundary. Don't know how long it took. Xianxia's side had actually accumulated a thick layer of mysterious space crystal powder, almost drowning him. Taking advantage of the power of mysterious space crystal for a long time, coupled with his own perception and insight, Xianxia vaguely felt that he had a deeper level of accomplishment in the power of space force, but he also found that as he mastered the power of space force, and as he absorbed the energy of mysterious space crystal to grow himself, it seems that the role it can play is getting smaller and smaller. Perhaps one day, no matter how much he absorbs the energy of the mysterious space crystal, he won't make any progress. Xianxia paused temporarily, and once again released his spiritual mind to refine this small world. After a while, he raised his brows and his face revealed a touch of joy. The refining process is much easier than it was at the beginning, and he could clearly feel the barriers and constraints between this world and the outside world. As long as it is broken, he can walk out of here. The power of space force merges into the spiritual mind, with Xianxia as the center, spreading around like a tide. Xianxia tried to brand his own life mark on this world. Carve his soul mark to make it his own. A scene that made him stunned suddenly appeared. When his spiritual mind spread out, this small world that originally occupied only about 30 feet in radius suddenly became a little bigger, and the scenery that had not been seen before was also printed in the eyes. This result surprised Xianxia. But after thinking about it carefully, he figured it out. Although Xianxia refined the mysterious boundary bead a little, and he could freely enter and exit, but his grasp of the power of space force was still very shallow, so he could only open the space of about 30 feet in radius. He is different. He is much more advanced in space force than the old man, so he can expand more space. Xianxia suddenly became interested. He wanted to know what it would look like when all the mysterious small boundary were opened, and how big it would be. The original intention of refining the mysterious boundary bead to get out of trouble quietly changed. Xianxia was full of enthusiasm and enjoyed it, and began the process of exploration. crazily urging his own spiritual mind and mobilizing his grasp of space force. The world of the mysterious small boundary is like the beginning of chaos, expanding out a little bit, revealing scenery and charming scenery that has not been shown before. In this process, Xianxia discovered that all kinds of magical insights and mysterious powers poured into his heart and merged into the depths of his soul, making his insight into the power of space force clearer and clearer, which was countless times more effective than absorbing the energy of the mysterious space crystal. The power of expanding the universe of the mysterious small boundary and the power of the cultivation of space force actually formed a virtuous circle in this unintentional move. Xianxia was overjoyed and became more tireless. In the mysterious small boundary, that piece of heaven and earth is expanding every day, and Xianxia is also growing every day. With his cultivation realm, the shackles of the peak of the first-order void return stage made a natural breakthrough, and Xianxia was promoted to the second-order void return stage in the mysterious small boundary. After all, in Fallen Emperor Mountain, he had already reached the peak of the first-order void return stage. If he hadn't deliberately suppressed it, he could break through. He still didn't stop the pace of exploration, repeating the same thing all the time. The strength increased, the Saint Yuan became pure, the power of divine consciousness skyrocketed, and Xianxia gained an overall improvement. Even that spirit clone, it has been strengthened and nourished. Exhausted, he rested for a while. With no one relieved the boredom, he released the stone puppet and talked with it for a while. The stone puppet Xiaoxiao was still very interested in the second golden stone puppet. Even if this golden stone puppet is mentally disabled, it can only rely on Xianxia's spirit clone to control his actions, but it is the only one of Xiaoxiao's family. It takes the golden stone puppets very seriously. Whenever there is something good, it will be shared with him. Time passed by little by little. Xianxia didn't know how long he had stayed in this mysterious small boundary. He had consumed all the mysterious space crystal, and he also expanded this small world from the initial 30-meter radius to 100 miles, and there are new developments every day. Within that 100 miles, there are mountains and waters, and the scenery is wonderful. But this was far from the end of the mysterious small boundary, and in that unknown place, there were even more tickling secrets hidden. One day, Xianxia stood up, his spiritual mind expanded, and in a flash, all the plants and trees within 100 miles were printed into the investigation of his mind. He grinned and stretched out his hand in front of him a little bit. A whirlpool suddenly appeared, spinning, and a huge suction was coming from it. Xianxia did not resist, allowing the vortex to suck himself into it, and the person disappeared in the next moment. To be continued.